Forward Pinellas Board Meeting of October 13th, 2021. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. And if we could please stand for the invocation and the pledge. And who is leading the invocation?
I am. Thank you.
Commissioner Marks.
Please join me in the invocation. Creator God, we ask for your guidance, wisdom, and support while we gather here today to conduct the business of local government, the deliberative body which is closest to the people. Remind us that the primary role of leaders is to serve, and that the primary goal is for the sake of the people we serve. In this regard, help guide this governing body to engage in meaningful discussions to move our community forward in a spirit of mutual respect and common decency, while considering the implications that our decisions will have now and into the future. We unite here today around these noble aims and common purpose. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Mertz.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, we're going to go around with introductions. We'll start with Commissioner Eggers and go around the room.
Dave Eggers, County Commissioner.
Commissioner Cliff Mers, City of Safety Harbor, representing the communities of Oldsmar, Tarpon Springs, and Safety Harbor.
Councilmember Brandy Gabbard, City of St. Petersburg.
Commissioner Karen Seal, Pinellas County.
Vice Mayor Patty Reed, City of Pinellas Park.
Janet Long, Pinellas County Commissioner, District 1.
Julie Ward-Bajolski, Mayor of the Great City of Dunedin.
Councilmember Bonnie Noble, Kenneth City, representing the inland communities.
Pat Gerard, Pinellas County Commissioner.
Councilmember David Albritton, City of Clearwater.
Cookie Kennedy, the Mayor of the City of Indian Rocks Beach, representing all the beach communities.
And I'm Whit Blanton, the Executive Director.
And I'm Darden Rice on St. Pete City Council and Chair of Forward Pinellas. Are there any citizens wishing to be heard on any items that are not already on the agenda for action by the board today? Tina, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
No, Madam Chair, we do not.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to turn this over to Whit for recognitions and announcements.
Okay, the first recognition is for Community Planning Month, and we are asking the board to formally recognize it. And it's around the concept of community conversations. And I think that's an important distinction, because we are meeting with our legislative delegation this month across the state of Florida as part of the American Planning Association. Legislative session is just starting, and in many of our communities here in Pinellas County, our planning staff are having community conversations with people whose lives we may be affecting with transportation or land use decisions. And in particular, the Downtown St. Petersburg Mobility Study. This whole month of October, we are having a series of virtual workshops, open house meetings, and other conversations to get citizen feedback on some concepts and ideas that we're testing. We're sharing those findings and results, and then we're asking the citizens to vote on a quantitative scale of how they like or dislike these different options. And we'll bring that information back to you all. But it's not just St. Petersburg and the Downtown Mobility Study. It's various projects and issues throughout our county and, frankly, throughout our region. And so we ask the board to acknowledge Community Planning Month. Do you want to have a motion first or do that afterwards? Okay, all right. The next bit of recognition I want to identify is for the Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit. All of the partners in the Safe Streets Summit throughout the region, and we're the host this year, are honoring people in their community, leaders in their community who have become either Vision Zero Heroes or Bob the Builder Awards, who are people helping get things done to improve safety and affect people's lives in a positive way. So I have 2 awards that I'm going to give. We have one person here to give the award to. The first award is a Vision Zero Hero Award for Heather Richardson. Heather is on the board of directors for the Safety Harbor Art and Music Center, SHAMC, it's popularly known, and she has been a very strong advocate for our community and our region, frankly. She helped support our, what do we call that? Our Bike Your City, thank you. I'm thinking about too many things. Our Bike Your City event, where they sponsored an art exhibit and installation, which you will see in Safety Harbor as you're walking by the boardwalk there. And they've just been a real tireless advocate for promoting arts and community. And we will award this Vision Zero Hero to Heather at a future opportunity. She's not able to make it here today. Our second Vision Zero Hero Award is awarded to Beatrice Farrell, who is part of the Deuces Live in St. Petersburg. Beatrice is here with us today, so I'll ask her to come up and just want to say thank you and present you with this Vision Zero Hero Award and this gift certificate.
Oh.
Yeah. And if you want to say a few words to the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, board members for Pinellas, to assembled fellow citizens. I accept this award on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Deuces Live, on behalf of the City of St. Petersburg, their City Council, the administration, and the city staff that really helped make this possible. Thank you.
Sure.
Beatrice, stick around at the podium for a second when you're done with your picture.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. And Madam Chair told me to stay,
Yeah,
so.
no. You can go ahead.
Councilmember Gabbard?
So very quickly, I just want to say congratulations, so well-deserved. As a friend and a fellow St. Pete resident, so proud of you and all the work that you do. You make such a difference in our community, and thank you to everyone in the Deuces for what you do.
My pleasure.
Very, very proud.
It's because of the city staff and the administration and city council that really makes things happen, so thank you.
And I would like to add real quick, too, that anyone paying attention to Deuces Live and the transformational project it is, not just for that part of the city, but for the entire city, and has talked to Beatrice and just really seen her engagement, her energy, and how forward-looking she is, like big picture, small details. Beatrice is exactly the type of community activist every city, every neighborhood loves to have. And thank you. You totally deserve this great award and many other kinds of awards. So thank you, Beatrice.
But on behalf of the Board of Directors who continue to employ me, I have to thank them too. So, okay. Thank you.
See what I mean? See what I mean? Okay.
I keep forgetting my props. So we've got one other award that we did not put on the agenda, and it's a little bit of a surprise, but I do want to acknowledge one of our staff who has gone above and beyond and done some great things over the last little bit. So, Maria, would you come up and join me? So many of you know Maria Kelly, our secretary, and she is the glue that holds this agency together. So I want to read a little letter to you, if you bear with me. Since joining Ford Pinellas in 2016, you've consistently shown tremendous energy and enthusiasm for the full range of work we perform. You continue to make important contributions to the efficient and consistent process of countywide planning and regional decision-making. Through the last 18 months, you've also shown steady resilience and dedication in the role of maintaining in-office operations while the rest of us work remotely. You've been particularly valuable throughout our journey from in-person to fully hybrid, to hybrid, and back to in-person. In addition to your steadfast devotion to the agency, you've demonstrated an ongoing commitment to higher education. In 2018, you earned your first degree, a bachelor's in psychology from Old Dominion University, and fulfilled your lifelong dream. Most recently, you've earned your master's degree in business administration, accompanied by a certificate in graduate accounting. We could not be more proud of this major accomplishment. It is an impressive demonstration of your focus, energy, and ambition to learn and improve your knowledge and abilities. We know that you'll continue to learn and grow professionally and contribute in many ways. Your love of learning is to be commended. On that basis, I am awarding you 16 hours of administrative leave as an acknowledgement for your latest accomplishment. And on behalf of the board, the staff, please accept my sincere thanks and congratulations. And we have this Performance Perks Award for you, the letter I just read, and then we have a small gift for you. Standing up. Good job. You can't leave. So. All right. Thank you.
And we do have a comment from Commissioner Kennedy.
So, Maria, I'm glad you came in and got your hair cut because I knew you were getting this award, and I wanted you to look beautiful, which you do look beautiful, and that's a great dress, too. Just want to thank you for all the things that you've done for Forward Pinellas and always keeping us in order, the elected officials, and love your husband. I don't know if you saw the collage, but there's some really great pictures. And just want to thank you for all you do. And as a fellow person going back to school a little bit older, I really appreciate the fact that you continued your education. So good luck with everything.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Very well deserved. Thank you. So before we move on from this agenda item, do we hear a motion to support the proclamation for Community Planning Month?
I move to recognize October as Community Planning Month.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Unanimous. Thank you all. So we're going to move on to the consent agenda. And Tina, do we have, well, before we go to public comment, are there any board members that wish to pull any consent agenda items? Okay, I don't see any. Tina, do we have anybody that wants to speak to the consent agenda?
No, Madam Chair, we do not.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. You got it? Who is the seconder? Okay,
Either
Mayor
one of us,
Kennedy?
I don't care.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is item 6, the public hearing items. Item 6A, we have a presentation from Jensen Hackett with the FDOT. There's not a PowerPoint. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. And good afternoon, board members. Jensen Hackett with the Department of Transportation. There we go. Today, I will be going over 3 separate amendments for the I-275 corridor in Pinellas County, which will actually amend as one amendment at the end. So these projects include lane continuity and express lane improvements along I-275 from north of 54th Avenue South to I-375, I-375 to 54th Avenue North, and 54th Avenue North to north of 4th Street North, otherwise referred to as Section 2 of I-275. This amendment includes design work being done as part of the encompassing project. The TIP amendments being put in front of you for numbers 424-501-7 and 449-109-2 involve federal funds being placed on this design work for the project, which require not only a TIP amendment with Forward Pinellas' current TIP, but also with the state TIP, which is the STIP. For project number 449109-1, which is the segment from 54th Avenue North to north of 4th Street North, state funds are being used for the design work, which does not require a subsequent STIP amendment. However, for federal consistency purposes, Ford Pinellas staff would like to amend this project into the MPO's TIP during this amendment process. So to recap, the first is 424501-7, which is I-275 from north of 54th Avenue South to I-375. This is for just over $5.6 million for design work. 449109-2, which is I-275 from north of I-375 to 54th Avenue North, just over $4.7 million in design work. And 449109-1, which is the 54th Avenue North to north of 4th Street North, which is just over $5.6 million for design work. One note on this is that this was obviously taken out of the work program just about a year and a half ago due to the REC reductions as part of the pandemic. Construction still has not been placed back inside the FDOT work program. However, we are making sure to keep this project moving forward for if and when those funds do become available so that we can move right on this project if that does get included in the work program sometime in the near future. So for this amendment specifically, this does not affect any other projects that are currently within the Ford Pinellas TIP. And as always, if you have any questions, I can take those at this time.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the board? This seems pretty straightforward, that now we've got more of a green light to move forward with these projects and the committed funding. Now we just have to put it back into our work plan as a priority.
Correct. And this is the design work going ahead is sort of out in front of that.
Right, as a precursor to the construction.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Alrighty. Tina, do we have anyone in the room who wishes to address the board on this vote?
No, Madam Chair, we do not.
And we can approve all three amendments in one motion? But it needs to be a roll call. Okay, so do I hear a motion to approve the three amendments to the TIP? And so I heard a motion from Commissioner Gabbard and a second from Commissioner Gerard, and we'll do a roll call vote.
Mayor Bujalski?
Aye.
Councilmember Noble?
Yes.
Commissioner Gerard?
Yes.
Councilmember Albritton? Mayor Kennedy?
Yes.
Commissioner Eggers? Commissioner Mers?
Yes.
Councilmember Gabbard?
Yes.
Commissioner Seal?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Long?
Yes.
And Chair Rice?
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Board. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Jensen. Our next item is a Pinellas Planning Council item, and 6B1 has been moved to November 10th, and we don't need to take a vote to, I'm sorry. Okay, we need to take a vote. I need to hear a motion to approve moving this item to November 10th. Okay, so did you get that, Tina? Okay, great. So all in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. And item 6B2 with the City of Oldsmar also needs to be pushed back to, I think, January. We do need to re-advertise that meeting for sunshine law purposes. Do I hear a motion to postpone the case CW 21-14 to January or another date as determined?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Got that, Tina? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you. Passes unanimously as well. Okay, on to item number 7, presentation and action items. We'll start with the PSTA activities report. Commissioner Gerard.
Thank you. PSTA Board met on September 29th, adopted our final budget, and talked about several long-term initiatives for the agency, including bus replacements and legislative agendas. of the PSTA's 210 bus fleet, 210 buses fleet, I'm not sure what, 60 of them need to be replaced in the next 5 years, and our objective is to replace all of them with electric vehicles. We have approximately, or we've estimated we have about 2/3 of the funds that we need for that. And we're hoping to gain the other $30 million from several places, including maybe Forward Pinellas. But we're hoping some for federal money and the Volkswagen settlement and on. State legislative priorities, actually Brad Miller, Dan Saraki, and Jamie Robinson are in Tallahassee today, meeting with state legislators about transportation disadvantages funds, which got cut last year, as well as, what else? Well, the electric bus program. They're also planning a DC trip to talk about the RAISE grant for the Clearwater Multimodal Center and buses. We recently were going to put in a grant for Clearwater Ferry, but decided to wait until next year. Hillsborough County put in a grant for their Cross Bay Ferry instead. And we're hoping we will have their cooperation next year to support our effort. Let's see. And we're looking for track members, Transportation Transit Riders Advisory Committee. I do that. So if you know of anybody. Oh, good. We have a great group right now. And our next board meeting is October 27th. And that's it.
Commissioner Gerard, have there been discussions about the money for the operation and maintenance for the electrical charging stations? I've heard a little bit about the capital grants, but how are we anticipating covering O&M?
Actually, the maintenance for the electric buses is much, much less than a diesel or a hybrid. So the money that we'll be saving on fuel will be used for charging, but also we're looking at Duke Energy to help us with that. We've been in ongoing talks with them.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And our next item, 8B, is a Forward Pinellas Legislative Committee update. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. The Tbarda activities report. Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't really have anything to report from Tbarda. We did have a pretty exciting TMA meeting a week or two ago, and Commissioner Eggers was there. And for the first time ever, we had a conversation about having a joint meeting with the Hillsborough group, and I thought that was a very, very positive movement forward. Our next Tbarda board meeting is this coming Friday, and the meeting is at PSTA.
Great. Thank you.
Just a reminder, because I think I said it last month, that we are now starting to have meetings, is Tbarda is leading a corridor feasibility study for transit in the US 19 corridor between State Road 52 in Pasco County and the Gateway Mid-County area in Pinellas County. So like where the Largo PSTA transfer point is would be sort of the southern terminus of that, or a future intermodal center. The study is just getting started, but our staff is participating in that, and I just wanted to let you know that Tbarda is moving forward with that.
Great. Thank you very much. So our next item is 7C, and this is an action item. We're going to hear from Rodney Chapman, and this is regarding the approval of scope of services for the Target Employment Industrial Land Study. Hi, Rodney.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. Again, Rodney Chapman, Planning Division Manager here for Pinellas. I'm here today to talk to you about something that you've heard me talk a lot about during the last budget development process, and that's the update to the Target Employment and Industrial Land Study. that was conducted back in 2008 and served as a policy foundation for those preservation policies that we have in the countywide rules, essentially maintaining land for high-paying jobs for our residents. So the policies that preserve land for target employment can be traced back to the 3-year effort that was led by the PPC and Pinellas County Economic Development. That work was completed back in 2005 and was called Pinellas by Design. Some of you may remember that and were involved in that effort. It was a landmark work that included a robust community engagement component whereby many citizens and business interests were involved in the public engagement. There were 3 summits, and there was also a 50-member steering committee that was actually chaired by Commissioner Seal. That effort was developed and served as the Economic Development and Redevelopment Plan for Pinellas County, and recommended a series of actions be taken on a collaborative basis by countywide and local government jurisdictions. One of the key findings was that creating high-wage jobs was crucial to maintaining the vision of Pinellas as a community of quality communities. The plan identified a series of recommendations, including shifting the orientation of our codes and standards to facilitate job creation and quality redevelopment opportunities. A key step in changing the orientation of our codes and standards, as recommended by Pinellas by Design, was the development of the Target Employment and Industrial Land Study. This was another collaborative effort by the PPC and Pinellas County Economic Development that was completed in 2008. This work analyzed the location and conditions of industrial designated land, whether they met the standards and needs of the county's target industries, and the circumstances under which we would allow those land uses to convert to other uses. One of the overarching findings of that work was that the availability of land for target industries was an impediment here in Pinellas County. For example, the county needed to attract or create about 182,000 new jobs by 2025. And that number of jobs would require about 8,000 acres of land. And at the time, there was only about 4,000 acres of vacant available land for those types of uses. The study also included a series of recommended actions, including developing a number of new regulatory techniques to preserve land for target employers and develop financial incentives to attract and retain businesses. The countywide plan was subsequently amended to incorporate land preservation policies, and those policies have been in place since that time. Pinellas County has also recently established the Employment Sites Program, which makes grant funds available to target industries to offset some of the costs associated with new construction or business expansion. We are truly excited to begin this work to update the 2008 study for a couple of reasons. One, I think we've all seen during this pandemic period that technology has caused some pretty significant changes in workforce needs, logistics, business operations, and remote work. And we need to better understand that in order to develop appropriate and effective land use policies. Secondly, we believe there is great value in assessing the effectiveness of those land use policies over the last 13 years. As planners, at least I believe we don't often do enough of looking back in the plans and programs and projects that we enact to determine if the goals that we sought out to achieve were actually met. This work will also, again, be a collaborative effort between our agency and Pinellas County Economic Development, as the past 2 efforts were. And they have provided some constructive input into the draft scope that you have before you today. There are 4 main elements in the scope. The first is an evaluation of the effectiveness of the existing policies which preserve land for those high-paying jobs. There will be an assessment of the needs of those industries. We have a pretty good benchmark from the 2008 study whereby that work was able to reach about 450 businesses to determine their needs and challenges, and we hope to exceed that number with this update to that 2008 study. We will identify best practices that balance target employment goals with workforce housing needs and other countywide interests. We've had a few things that have risen to the forefront, one of them being House Bill 1339 and its ability, well, It's preemption of our land preservation policies and have allowed local governments to approve affordable housing projects on land regardless of their zoning or land use designation. And then we will develop a series of amendments to the countywide plan which position the county for continued economic growth and quality redevelopment. So this work is unique in that it's a blend of economic analysis and land use policy evaluation. Given these elements, we will work to create or work with our consultant teams that are under contract with us and possibly put together at least 2 firms that can work together to achieve these scope objectives. So after the board's action today, we plan to reach out to these firms and execute task work orders and begin the project in November. We hope to be able to wrap up the work by the summer of 2022 and have included a stakeholder engagement plan as one of the key tasks for the consultant team, and will ensure that we provide periodic updates to this board, the Countywide Planning Authority, and our other partners as we execute the work plan. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Efforts of yourself and staff to put this together. A couple of I guess, questions and a couple of comments. The first one is, can you talk a little bit about the consultants and the plan for this?
Sure.
Obviously, this is a unique area, and I know you have certain list of consultants that you're working with.
Yes.
What's the plan to make sure that this particular area of interest, which may not be part of a normal
Absolutely.
group, is well covered?
Well, let's take a step back and just share with you that every few years we go through a consultant selection process, and the last one was back in 2020, where we put out a solicitation to the consultant community and asked for them to submit qualifications to us under various skill sets, and things like urban design, transportation analysis, economic development and economic analysis, to name a few, are the categories that we asked them to submit qualifications on. And so our last round, again, was of doing that was back in early 2020, and we had over 50 consultants submit qualifications to us. We went through an evaluation process. We actually created a evaluation team of our staff and representatives from our partner local governments. So we had representatives from the City of Clearwater, from Pinellas County, as well as our staff to vet these 50 proposals and shortlist a number of those. And we actually shortlisted 25 and brought those 25 in for presentations. And after the presentation phase, then we selected 20 and brought those 20 to the board in July for approval and authorization to execute contracts with each of those firms. So we have 20 firms under contract at the moment, and they provide a host of skill sets and services. Your question got to, how do you pick one? How do you feel? How do you determine which one's the best fit? Unfortunately, we've had some experience with the economic analysis consultant, for example, already. They have done work for not only for us, but they through the Gateway Master Plan, but they've actually worked for the City of Indian Rocks Beach on the visioning study and provided some economic analysis to supplement that effort. And they have also worked with Pinellas County on developing a framework for the $80 million in Penny 4 money. They're a well-respected firm out of Chicago that has a pretty good, robust portfolio of experience. So that's an example of one of the types of firms that we have that could be teamed up with some of our land use firms to help execute the work. The process we go by to actually select one is a bit of a conversation, if you will. So we actually set up meetings with each of the project managers of the firms that we feel would be best suited for the work, and we will share the scope with them, talk about our understanding of the work, how they would hope to, well, first of all, determine if they have the capacity to take on the work. Do they have a full understanding of what we're trying to accomplish? And a different wrinkle this time around is, since we have so many, we have to make sure that we're distributing the work equally, because we want to make sure that all the 20 firms will get work they're qualified to do. In a nutshell, that's sort of the next steps in the process, not only that we've taken to arrive at this point to have the 20 consultants under contract, but also how we will then move forward to select a team that best fits the needs that are identified in the scope.
Well, I appreciate that. Based on that discussion, I understand the whole process of how you went through and got down to the 20. The examples that you provided that were used, to me, don't still focus on the unique specifics of industrial requirements. And so, case in point, you indicated some items, let's say in task 1, looking at prior planning and policy documents. And in one of them, which is an excellent one, is the 2014 Pinellas County Economic Leadership Symposium. There was a very good presentation by William Fruth, who talked about what, between 2003 and 2013, looking at what recommendations were, and then coming back and looking at, in 2014, where did they come from? How well did they meet it? What do they need?
Right.
And looking at that particular presentation, to me, it looks like there's a specific knowledge set that's necessary in order to, because this is a pretty important, I think,
yes, absolutely,
topic, right? And the fact that if you don't find sufficient depth in those 20, is there a procedure to reach out to open that up, rather than just say, it got to be in one of these 20, and I got to evenly distribute it, and so it goes here?
There is a process, Commissioner, yes, to do just what you said. It's a little inside baseball, but what essentially would happen is most likely one of the land use planning firms would be the prime on the work, and they would bring in that case, Polycom, which is Bill Fruth's firm, as the economic analysis subconsultant to them.
So if it turned out that you felt that there was not a sufficient depth in any of those, you would then reach out to make sure that you had a suitable amount of
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
Well, that's something I appreciate that. The second thing that I wanted just to mention was in the task 2, the target employer's needs assessment. I think this is an excellent summary. One item that I would like to just offer is, these are all, I think, very good from the target employer's needs assessment for land use and infrastructure and things like that. I think I would like to see maybe an item 5 where, as long as you're taking the opportunity now to look out, to do this target employer survey, to ask questions not only pertaining to land use, infrastructure, and whatever, I would like to also see that you take the opportunity to look at skill set. Employee skill set. There's lots of discussions about, we have a certain amount of land, but it's hard to bring somebody in order to do that particular industry,
right,
because there isn't necessarily the necessary workforce development skill set out there, right? Here you've got an opportunity now where you're talking to those people to try to find out, what do we need in infrastructure? What do we need in land? But I think it would be a very good opportunity as well to ask, what do we need for the skill sets necessary? And it may turn out that we're well covered, but it may also turn out that there are some areas that we do not have sufficient coverage in. And that may be something then that some of the educational groups in the area, PTECs, the local colleges, universities, whatever, could then identify as areas that would be needed, and then to be able to come up with solutions to try to fill that. So that way you've got a two-pronged approach, and not necessarily have to do it in a separate document or a separate survey, because to me it fits all part of that piece parcel.
That's an excellent comment, and I think there's a way to fold that into actually task 2. Because I firmly believe in your point you made in terms of when you reach out to these folks who are non-traditional partners, it's very good. Take the opportunity to get as much from them as you can while you can.
Right.
And so, yeah, we definitely will incorporate that into task 2 and convey those results to those higher education institutions that you mentioned. Because I also believe Pinellas County Economic Development would be interested in that skills needs gap if there is one.
If there is one, right. And you hear that potentially there is. But this seems like a good opportunity at this point, and sometimes people get survey fatigue where they don't necessarily want to keep answering, or they may not give it the same depth the second time through, the third time.
Absolutely.
So, all right, well, I thank you very much for the consideration of your time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Gerard and then Commissioner Eggers.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you knew about the Innovation Center that we have coming online, and the major investor that we have just announced in the last couple of days. We had a presentation yesterday. Was it only yesterday? About our investment management who's coming here. They're moving a headquarters here. They're investing
I've read about
in the Innovation Center.
Yes.
The way they were talking about it's going to be transformational to the depth of Silicon Valley right here in Pinellas County. And I think we at least should be talking to those people about what their vision is. Obviously, economic development has their visions, but there's a reason why they're coming here with their money and investing in our community. So it would be interesting to see what they have in mind.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Eggers.
You took one of the two comments I had. Thank you, Commissioner Gerard, for bringing that up. It's, we're talking about needs assessments today. They're dramatic out there, and we don't have the folks to fill the jobs. That's for today, and you see it all over the place, and there's a lot of work being done between universities and economic developments and cities and counties to try to bring forward programs that actually meet those needs. And so, we're not talking about for today, although they exist dramatically today. But going forward, I think having that assessment and that idea, they were talking about some of the jobs in this program that Commissioner Gerard was just mentioning that it will be for the jobs that aren't even in play today. So it'll be for the kids that are in kindergarten, that might be, when they get to that age, the jobs will be there for them. So it was really exciting to hear, and certainly in between those two eras, today and 20 years from now, there's going to be that. And I think that's a great idea. I really appreciate you bringing that up. It's got to be a vital piece to all of this. So, so thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Gabbard.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. In reading this and then hearing your presentation, one of the things that stood out to me was the idea of this balance of the competing interests. And really, for me personally, that would be the catalyst for this particular type of work. Can you point to me within this scope where we're really going to get down to what that balance is? Because I would hate to see us do all of that and then still not have that question answered.
It's in kind of when I talked about that third leg of the four-legged stool in looking at best practices. We've done a little bit of that research. It's referenced in the literature review part of the scope. We had one of our consultants do a best practices and case studies small assignment where they did their best to contact and engage communities from around the country that were struggling with this idea of land for high-paying jobs, but also dealing with the workforce housing crisis, if you will. And they were able to reach out to 2 to 3 communities. Minneapolis was one. Believe it or not, Jacksonville was doing some pretty interesting things. And then out in Seattle. And so, again, that was just a smaller assignment to just get a better understanding of how to tackle this issue. And we want to do a deeper dive in than what we were able to do with the small assignment that we had the consultant do a few months ago.
Well, I certainly support this work, and hearing, that is one of the goals, is finding what that balance is and giving some direction to all of us looking to do this work. Yeah. What makes the best sense for the long run? Obviously, the city of St. Pete already taking advantage of House Bill 1339, and we'll see tomorrow's the final vote on that. But really us wanting to strike that perfect balance, I think is an important thing, that we're doing that countywide. And we're doing that more collectively so that it's not adversarial.
Yes, and your staff has been great. They've run, we've had several meetings with them about House Bill 1339 and how to implement that, and they've provided drafts for us to review, and so it's been a really good relationship. And if you allow me to talk a little bit more about this, one of the things that we found interesting in that small research assignment was that a lot of communities are dealing with industrial land preservation in a nuanced way. So in some areas of the jurisdiction, there are pretty much what they call industrial sanctuaries. So land where it's the most viable, the prime land for target employment, and that's preserved. There's a high bar to convert that land. But then there are other areas that are either planned for industrial or have industrial or target employment uses on them, but aren't as viable for various reasons. And these communities have sort of like a mixed use or a more flexible program that allows for you to maintain the target employment uses, but also bring in complementary uses like commercial uses, residential, others to supplement those target employment uses. So sanctuaries in certain places, but then allowing some mixing of uses in other parts of the industrial areas in the peer cities we've looked at. So I think that's something for us to explore a little further here in the county. And, I'm really excited about sharing sort of what we learned as we go through the course of the project.
Fantastic. Well, I'm definitely a fan of this work, so thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I have a few questions. Commissioner Reed? Oh, Seal. No, okay. Well, this is exciting. This is a really important study. I mean, just the way that industrial processes and manufacturing and patterns are changing, I mean, that's a very significant shift, and we want to be sure to get it right, because I think the St. Pete member government is certainly one of those maybe pushing the nuances a bit ourselves. And so it'll be really good to really get into this thoroughly. I'm glad to hear, and I just want to reinforce that as part of your work in engaging stakeholders, that the potential for this report to actually inform policy is huge. So it's really important that member governments, Forward Pinellas, all the stakeholders are fully engaged, because I wouldn't want this study to get ahead of us as if it's something that we've approved and then it's driving policy.
Right.
And I am a little bit nervous. If I don't know if I heard you right, but the 20 consultants?
Well, we look at it as we have a lot of options. We have a lot of good consultants, and we have firms that have a lot of expertise and capacity potentially, and that's sometimes the constraint, because if you have a smaller list, they may not have the capacity that you need to really put the horsepower on a project. And so we feel pretty comfortable with having that many to draw from, that we will be ensured to have quality work being done for the taxpayers. your early comment about engagement, that's speaks to why we put the public engagement or stakeholder engagement plan in the scope, because there are a lot of different techniques that can be used to ensure that everybody is moving in the same direction as the work progresses. And, some of the things we've talked about internally could be a steering committee, maybe not on the scale of Pinellas by Design, but something where we have broad representation that meets regularly and keeps their fingerprints on the work as it evolves through the schedule. So things like that are opportunities for us to ensure that everybody is in support of the work and the findings and how it's implemented.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And on page 7, there's not an amount that's mentioned as for the draft fee schedule. So what's a ballpark?
We have $250,000 in the PPC budget for this work.
Okay.
And we think that's adequate.
Okay. I think that's it for me. Commissioner Seal?
Thank you. Sorry. As Rodney continued to talk, and then you asked the question about the dollars, I was curious about that as well. But I agree with doing some kind of steering committee. And I do want to emphasize the importance of making sure the county is involved, because if you recall, last time there was this planning document and this planning document, and neither did the twain meet. And so we ended up in a very protracted lawsuit that we prevailed and won, but it was pretty painful, so I don't ever want to go through that again. And you probably remember.
Yes.
So, thank you, Cliff, for bringing forward Mr. Fruth, because he did provide us with, it'd be really interesting to see what he thinks at this point.
Agreed.
Especially with the turnaround in the economy and all the changes that we've seen because of the pandemic.
Right.
I mean, actually, I'm surprised our economy is as resilient as it's been.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an action item, and do I hear a motion to approve the scope of services?
Madam Chair, we need to call for public comment.
Thank you.
Although we don't have any.
Okay. So thank you for making that correction. Do we hear a motion to, hearing that there's no public comment here, or no one here wishing to comment on this, we'll move ahead to a vote. Do I hear a motion to approve the scope of services for the Target Employment Industrial Land Study?
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Our next item is 7D, the private sector perspectives for transit and jobs access, and we have Dave Sobush from Tampa Bay Partnership. Good afternoon, Dave.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and Forward Pinellas board members. On behalf of the Partnerships Council of Governors and our new CEO, B. Mitra Simmons, thank you for the opportunity to be here and share the results of our job access study that we did over the last few years. I'll talk a little bit first about what it is we did with the study, and then I'll get into why we did it. We started with this notion of this report that was done in 2011 by the Brookings Institution, Missed Opportunity, Transit and Jobs in Metropolitan America. And at that time, it ranked Tampa Bay 93rd in terms of the number of jobs, or the share of jobs within the metro that could be reached within a 90-minute transit commute. And as the partnership shifted from business development and marketing into public policy and advocacy, we wanted to see if those numbers had changed as we began our work in transportation. It turns out that there were a few other models and better ways to estimate that number, and we turned to the University of Minnesota and their Accessibility Observatory. It's not a very attractive name, but it is very descriptive. They observe the accessibility of jobs based on a variety of commute modes. What we did with the University of Minnesota was slightly different from what we saw them do previously. The typical modus operandi for the Accessibility Observatory is to take a look at a single project and say, how does this move the needle on job access? We asked them to take a look at a system-wide investment, and we broke that down into 4 different scenarios, which I'll get into. Instead of a 90-minute transit commute, which we thought was a little, far kilter, we decided to settle on a 60-minute transit commute. So the numbers that I'll show, it shows the change in job accessibility based on a 60-minute transit commute. That includes the time walking from one's residence to a station, riding the transit vehicle, and then walking to one's place of employment. One important thing here is we did not, come up with these plans ourselves. We merely took, and there's been plenty of studies done about transit in this area, and so there was no shortage of plans to pull from. And so we took published agency plans, most notably the PSTA, HART, PCPT, the transit agency transit development plans, as well as the Envision 2030, and we also modeled some premium transit projects that are under discussion within the region. And as we go through the results, I just want to highlight that these scenarios are additive. So we add in one layer of investment and we add in another, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means as sort of a policy takeaway at the end. So that's what we did. Why did we do it? Well, regional transportation, transportation is important throughout the region. It's also important, within the communities of Tampa Bay. And the big why, at least initially for our Council of Governors, was the fact that Tampa Bay continues to grow. And these numbers are somewhat dated. We are well above 93,000 new residents a year in the Tampa Bay region. We are likely to add more than 500,000 by the year 2030. We talked about that job access, and in that 2011 study that ranked Tampa Bay 93rd out of the 100 largest markets, only 16% of jobs were accessible within that 90-minute transit commute. And as we know from our work with United Way Suncoast, the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay, through the Regional Competitiveness Report, Tampa Bay ranks last, 20th out of the 20 markets we look at in terms of transit supply, which is measured by vehicle revenue miles per capita, as well as transit demand. Those two sort of go hand in hand. So this is sort of the why the Tampa Bay Partnership, a coalition of regional business leaders, got into this this analysis. Our friends to the east in the Orlando Economic Partnership, when they released their findings and transportation recommendations for public policy, this was the cover of their report, and it was, "This is not about transportation." Because really transportation is a means to an end. It's getting students to a place of education. It's about getting a worker to a job so they can increase the prosperity of their family. It's about really fulfilling all of the possibilities within a region and the communities of that region. So these are the scenarios we took a look at. They are very cleverly named A, B, C, and D. And again, they are additive. And when we take a look at scenario A, we're looking at the 10-year needs elements of the regional transit agencies and their transit development plans. Scenario B adds in the Sunrunner, which is under construction, the streetcar modernization and extension in downtown Tampa, and the proposed bus rapid transit service that HART is looking at along the Florida Avenue corridor between downtown Tampa and USF. Scenario C adds into that mix the regional rapid transit, and by your vote earlier today, you helped maybe move that project along a little bit by getting the design work in for those express lanes south of 54th Avenue. A lot of, as I was listening to the previous presentations, a lot of connectivity between the actions of this board and the outcomes that we'll see on this map, and so thank you for that. And then scenario D adds in, that is the kitchen sink. That is the Tbarda Envision 2030 regional transit vision, and it includes many different types of projects. We'll break those down in just a moment. One note I do want to make sure, the scenarios are divided this way. They do represent unequal amounts of investment, which is, financial or otherwise. So again, when we take a look at what is sort of the mix of projects within scenario A, which is that local agency transit plans, we're looking at 18 brand new routes in Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough, as well as 34 routes that get either increased frequency, reducing the headways from 30 minutes to 15 or from 15 to 8, or extending the hours. A bus that may run only from, on weekdays, may get some additional weekday type service on the weekends. Scenario B adds in, as I mentioned, those 2 BRT routes, the Sunrunner in St. Petersburg, as well as the Florida Avenue and that streetcar modernization extension. Scenario C adds in everything plus the regional rapid transit. And then scenario D has a lot, but the key things in there, 8 express bus plans, 8 BRT routes, one of which was the aforementioned corridor study between Hudson in Pasco County, running down US 19, and then eastward to Gateway. And then 5 rail projects of differing investment levels. And again, the same disclaimer there presented in red for your convenience. So what are we looking at? When we take a look at the map, adding in those local bus plans, just dropping them into reality, the darker the color shows the greater percentage of job access for those neighborhoods. So you see, some previously underserved transit neighborhoods, most notably, I'd say like Town and Country, along that US 19 corridor near sort of between Courtney Campbell and Bel Air, but also the alternate 19 corridor stretching from roughly northern Dunedin into southern Tarpon Springs. You see some significant increases in the State Road 54, 56 corridor in Pasco County, and then sort of southern Hillsborough County. So what this means for the typical MSA resident, typical resident of Hernando, Pasco, Hillsborough, and Pinellas, they'd have access to 26,000 more jobs than they normally would, and that'd be close to, that'd be a 29% increase in job access. And you'd go from being able to access 7.2% of jobs to 9.2% of jobs. So that is sort of the delta there, and we note that we're looking at a base of 1.2 million jobs. Our consultant, the University of Minnesota Accessibility Observatory, did provide county by county results, as well as for St. Pete and Tampa, and I present those for your review there as well. You notice that sometimes if you take a look at the St. Petersburg example, the typical St. Pete worker is going to have access to nearly double the number of jobs in the MSA, but the share is going to be lower because they have the share is going to be roughly the same, 29.2% compared to the 29. That's because St. Pete, even though we have relatively low levels of transit service in the Tampa Bay region, St. Pete has among the best within the region, and you see the numbers there for Pinellas as well. So adding in the local premium, these are the extension of the streetcar as well as the 2 BRT routes. There's not a tremendous increase. It doesn't move the needle a lot. We go from 29% job access to 30.4, 9.1 to 9.3. So a very marginal impact region-wide. Now, of course, for residents living close to those facilities and those investments, they are likely to see a larger percentage and numeric increase. Adding in the regional rapid transit moves the needle more so than those 2 BRT projects and the streetcar extension. And as well it should. It's 41 miles. It connects 3 counties, major employment centers. And also, we note that this is added on to transit investments at the local level. So we have feeder routes that are, getting workers to the RRT where they can make rapid connections to other places. And so this is sort of what of those access gains in scenario C, the RRT, are due strictly to the RRT. So this is the difference between scenario B and scenario C. And we see, again, the access gains are concentrated around the RRT route, which starts up there in Wesley Chapel, continues down the 275 corridor. But they are by no means limited to the RRT corridor. And again, that's the benefit of that local transit service, the ribs connecting into the spine, or if you prefer, the spokes connecting into the hub. So then, of course, this is the big vision, and why not, if you're going to have a vision, vision big. In Vision 2030, this is the addition of multiple express bus routes, BRT routes, ferry service, and also including multiple rail investments. And we see we now are almost doubling the total number of jobs accessible. We went from 26,000 in scenario A to 52,000 in scenario D here. And ultimately, you get to 11.3% of all jobs accessible, the base of 7.2. Now, I said earlier in that Brookings study from 2011, they found us at 16. The differences are we've had some changes in where jobs are located, and so that gets into the importance of land use in the study that Mr. Chapman was discussing. Because when, one quick way to increase job accessibility is to make sure that employment locations are located, closer to transit, and so there's a land use component to all this, as well as the spread of suburban sprawl, not so much in Pinellas County, densely populated, but in the surrounding communities. That's how we kind of moved from that initial 16% in 2011 to 11.3 now. We did a couple deeper dives into these results to examine some equity issues, and one that we took a look at was these were neighborhoods that were impacted early on by the COVID pandemic. I'm pretty sure it was a mistake on the part of the Department of Economic Opportunity, but they released a lot of data at the zip code level that talked about who had filed for unemployment, what their jobs were, what their wages were, things of that nature. And from that, we were able to put together a map of COVID-impacted neighborhoods. This is taking a look at, so these are workers that are, they are susceptible to changes in the economy. Their work status, may be affected, by future shocks to the economy. And so we see that there is a pretty significant increase in job access for those COVID-impacted neighborhoods. We also took a look at neighborhoods within the region that have a relatively high level of poverty, so poverty rate above 20%, or they have limited vehicle access. So more than 20% of these households have access to no vehicles, or more than 75% have less than one vehicle access. And so again, we took a look, and again, these investments appear to be serving some of our most, many of our communities of concern within the region. So again, this is sort of that, taking a look at all that. At one point, you see as we move from the baseline, 7.2% of jobs accessible. We gradually move up, not that much of a difference between scenario A and B, a somewhat larger difference between scenario B and scenario C, showing the importance of a regional transit that connects many of the job centers, and then of course sort of that longer term vision for scenario D. But one thing we're going to see is when we break that down, and there's many ways to break this down. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get a apples to apples cost comparison for what the capital and operating for all these investments would be. But when we break it down on a project by project basis, and remember in that earlier slide I said scenario A has 18 of this and 34 of that. So 52 projects, the marginal job access change. So on average, each of those projects is contributing about 0.5% regional job access to the typical worker in the MSA. And looking at these scenarios, you see the importance of that regional project. But again, in our methodology, we are taking a look at a regional project that is supported by local transit. These just go through some of the numeric change. This is, if you take a look at, the typical worker in St. Petersburg, City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, Pasco County, Pinellas, and the region as a whole, under these different scenarios, how many more jobs is that typical resident worker able to access? You see that, many substantial improvements in both St. Petersburg and Pinellas relative to some of the other areas. These are in terms of numbers, but when you take a look in terms of the percentage change, you see that those they more or less get evened out. And so, there is a roughly, equal distribution of transit projects contemplated in the plans that we took a look at in terms of job access. Although, you could say that Pasco, Pinellas, and St. Petersburg are somewhat outperforming Tampa and Hillsborough based on the investments we modeled. So I talked about our competitiveness report in the transit rankings. We take a look at transit supply and transit demand. What we did here is we took a look at the Accessibility Observatory's rankings in terms of job access, and you see initially Tampa Bay is in that lower third of the rankings. Even with all those investments, 5 new rail lines, more than a dozen BRT projects, Tampa Bay is still going to be roughly middle of the pack. So that gets to how far behind we are in terms of both the supply and demand of transit, but also in terms of job accessibility. So among the key takeaways here, when a transit planner or when an MPO is taking a look at the effectiveness of a project based on FTA guidelines, you're looking at a lot of things like what is the economic development potential in terms of TOD, what is the cost effectiveness, and you hear a lot about that $10 a rider or less. You take a look at ridership and things like that. It's not included in the FTA process, but job access should be an additional goal of transit service and an analysis tool for transit planning. We talked about, and you saw the maps that showed that the regional rapid transit has a larger impact on job access than those county BRT and county streetcar projects. And while we do have this massive investment of local bus is going to move the needle quite a bit in terms of job access, there's a lot of locality effects in there. If you put in Pasco County's entire 10-year plan, they're not going to be able to access a ton of jobs because of the disconnect between the place of residence and the place of work. So you need those cross-county linkages. And this isn't just a question for workers and employers. To the comment I heard in the questions about the targeted industry land use study, this is a benefit to Pinellas County employers as well, giving them better access to workers that live outside the county. And when you hear about employers that cannot find workers, and when you go through the process of talking to them, they'll say, yeah, I've got a lot of people that have shown interest, but they don't have reliable transportation. They don't have access to a car on a daily basis, and therefore they can't come work in my factory. So if we're going to have a regional economy, we need to have a regional system that allows those commutes to occur. We talked about the Envision 2030 scenario, and even with that massive implementation, we go from 15th to 9th in job access among our 20 markets that we take a look at in the competitiveness report. And when you look at the 49 largest markets in the United States, Tampa Bay moves from 41st to 27th. And so what that shows, even with these massive investments, we're still not, at the top of any list, and that we need all of these things to really compete. And, a final policy thing here is that while we modeled and we had to have a methodology for our research, we added these scenarios on top of each other. They don't have to do that in real life, okay? Take advantage of the opportunities you have. If you talk to your counterparts on the Metro Plan Board in Orlando, Sunrail was not their #1 choice for a premium transit project. It was the opportunity they had. And so they said, we're going to start with that and we'll build everything because we had the opportunity to do so. And again, this is not just because I'm speaking to a group that, approves land use decisions. This is in every presentation. These land use strategies that incentivize transit-oriented development, affordable housing, and employment centers can accelerate and sort of supercharge the job access gains that you would see from the transit investment. So I think that's all I have. And with that, I'll thank you for your time. And Madam Chair, certainly stand for any questions.
Thank you, David. Wow, that was a lot. Questions, comments from the board?
Everybody's overwhelmed.
if there are any follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer those as you've had a chance to digest.
I do want to say that we invited Dave here to be the inaugural speaker for this private sector perspectives, and we've known each other a long time. I've worked with the partnership over the years, and I like that their focus is on advocacy for the region, because we lack that, and we need somebody out there who can help us with that. Ultimately, this comes down to finding the funding to get this in place, and so the more information that we have to make the argument for why investing in transit makes sense, studies like this can certainly help. But I wanted to ask you a question. How has the private sector responded to these findings? What have you heard when you've taken it out to, whether it's your board or to other partners? What sort of feedback are you getting?
Thank you, Whit. The feedback I get is that unlike the regional competitiveness report, everybody loves this study because there's something in it that speaks to them, because it shows a positive increase in job access regardless of what project you're considering. And I think that's the same as I speak to public sector groups like this one, as well as the private sector, because there is no monolithic private sector. It's a group made up of individuals with individual sort of goals and visions. But they like the idea that we're taking a look at why. Why are we doing this? And if the goal is to improve the economy and improve both the competitiveness of the region as well as the prosperity of our residents, well, how do we measure that, right? Because that's the next business question you ask. Is it's one thing to say it's going to, but by how much and which one does it more? And so this is a start of that, bringing that sort of discipline to taking a look at that aspect of the work. So that's largely the feedback I've gotten when I've reviewed this internally with our investors.
Well, I just asked because if we are going to make an investment in transit, we're going to need help from the private sector to lead that effort and make that argument and be there on the forefront with the elected officials and staff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've worked for the partnership off and on since 2010. I have campaign signs for Moving Hillsborough Forward, Green Light Pinellas, My Ride, My Roads, as well as All for Transportation. We were pleased that the partnership gave $250,000 from our budget and from our reserves to the All for Transportation effort in 2018, contributed to the Legal Defense Fund. Our business leaders are just that, and their operations, they may sit sometimes in Tampa, but they go home to Indian Rocks Beach, as is the case with our chair of the organization right now. And they need employees from everywhere, and even though we're moving to a lot of remote work, there's still a need for a personal banker, which is not the easiest thing to do over Zoom. Especially when like the microphone goes out or something like that. But, I think you can count on the partnership, continuing to be a strong advocate for regional solutions and regional, issues, transportation, and getting funding for them as well. I didn't mean to have my back to you,
Commissioner Long.
David, thank you for that presentation, which was very informative. And since the Tampa Bay Partnership was so heavily involved with PSTA, when we kept going back and forth to Washington to lobby for the funds, which we finally did get, it only took us 6 years. My question is, I don't think it's a secret that Hillsborough County plans to go right back out on the ballot for the all for transportation funding that has been held up in the courts, and God knows what they're going to do going forward. How behind do you think our county would be in not moving that forward at the same time?
Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner.
Just hypothetically.
Hypothetically, don't ask a guy with research in his title hypotheticals, because my suggestion would be to go out and, figure out what the temperature is of the electorate. And there's probably an advantage to going at the same time. There's, but if the proposals are too dissimilar in what they're trying to accomplish, there is also a chance that they can have that sort of deconstructive interference, and the message of one will affect voters of the other. And I reflect back on 2010 with moving Hillsborough forward. We got a lot of feedback, saying, well, the bullet train's never going to work. I'm not voting for it. Well, you weren't voting on the bullet train, but there was a tremendous amount of the electorate that thought that they were. And so if something like that were going to work, and I think it's always better to work together, if something like that were to work, it would be better if the planning was done cooperatively as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bajowski.
Thanks for your presentation.
My pleasure.
It really is just a comment versus a question, but it's similar to along the lines of Commissioner Long. I think back to, I have a green light Pinellas sign in my garage as well, and I think back to in 2021, that was in 2014, in 2021 we would have our first rail line out of St. Pete constructed right now. And it makes me sick, to be honest with you, because we're still talking about how are we going to fund transportation. And I know that this has been going on so much longer than that, but I'm just picking something that most of us can put our hands on. And it's just another reason, yes, access to jobs, yes, access to housing. Our tourists have no way to get around. What's the top two issues they have? Parking and transportation for our tourists. I mean, we are behind the eight ball, and we've developed behind the eight ball. And the fact that, in my mind, I don't know the ins and outs of a transit campaign, so I'm not going to even jump, even though I was a part of Greenlight. And that's not saying much because it failed. But I just want to say to my colleagues and anybody else watching, there is nothing more important than getting a funding source for transportation today and not 5 years from now because of some political crap. It is the only way that our region is going to develop in an economically viable way in the future and for our kids. And it's going to take a long time to do, and we need the money now so that we can start building it. So I'm just getting on my soapbox.
Heard. Okay. Anyone else? Commissioner Eggers.
And yeah, I think we all have to kind of look in the mirror a little bit. Our partners in the business community side by side with leaders in the government community, but the message was not made to the people, all right? So we are not communicating well enough, and I mean you, I'm not talking to all of us, to the compelling story that there is to our residents. And there's a disconnect between what we talk about and what a lot of our residents are experiencing. So somehow, as we move forward in our conversation, I think that work needs to be done too, because I think the work that you do is just incredibly important. The work that we're doing is important too. But you know, I'm just telling you, people, you know, they're just not. There's so much noise right now that's going on around this planet, this country, our area, that getting folks to focus on this, and as it translates to another penny, as an example, we just have to make sure that we're ready to have that message. And I'm obviously smart enough to develop that, but you know, we need to be having that conversation, because if we all believe in it strong enough, then somehow we've got to get it to grassroots. And Greenlight was just in all that it was not a good communicator to our folks. So they were listening to what it meant and what it was all about. So anyway, just a comment. I always want to make sure that we're bringing that along too, because otherwise it means nothing. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. And what I'm about to say, I don't mean this in any way as a criticism, but I just wanted to also say that, you know, the voices of the CEOs in our region are so important and so potentially very powerful. And I'm glad to see the collective effort coming from Tampa Bay Partnership, but also just think about ways that we, the public, can have a chance to interact and hear the powerful storytelling and narratives from the CEOs, because it's really helpful. Just when I had some meetings with some of our top regional hospital CEOs, to hear them discuss in person firsthand the difficulties in finding people to fill positions, like good paying positions, because of affordable housing. They can't hire people that are good. And I'm not talking about CNAs, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm talking about higher level positions. Even those positions, there are serious obstacles to fulfilling our workforce, and that is something that trickles down to public safety, to our healthcare source. So I think when people have the chance to hear some of the everyday kind of struggles and challenges from the CEOs, it makes these issues a lot less abstract and a lot more important, because we see how it really connects to us. Because we get to hear from a CEO's challenges, and I think we all know that when a CEO is having problems hiring people and growing and expanding, it doesn't take a huge leap of intellect to figure out how that holds back all of us in our cities and our communities. So keep up the great work, and we'd love to hear more directly from CEOs in different ways that we can engage with the community too.
Excellent. Thank you.
And you're awesome.
Oh.
It was just like, it's more, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Any more questions, comments before we move on?
David Albritton.
Yes, Commissioner Albritton.
Yeah, I just wanted to say what a wealth of information that you have. And, I think everybody that's been talking about this, it's hard to communicate this, but we're the salesmen to our community. And we've got to get out and, I think, do a better job of telling people this is where we need to go, because transit is so important to all aspects of the community. So thank you very much for all the information you brought today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is 7E, and we're going to hear from Jennifer Musselman from FDOT, and this is a presentation regarding alternate US 19 and the 5th Avenue North lane repurposing in St. Petersburg, and this is an action item.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to clarify for the board. FDOT is asking us to not make this an action item today. They've got a few more I's to dot and T's to cross, and we will bring this back for action early in the year, but it's for information purposes today.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Whit. You stole my thunder, but that's okay. All right. Good afternoon once again, board members. Jensen Hackett with the Department of Transportation. So we will be giving you this presentation on Alt US 19 in just a moment. But again, as what Whit was saying, this is listed as an action item, but we would like to do it just as a presentation, just because we would like to receive some further review from not only our district office, central office, but also FHWA in this process, just because the proximity of the interstate and the interstate on and off ramps is part of this project. However, we do encourage you to provide any comments at the end of this presentation, because we will use that as part of the review process internally, as well as with FHWA. So please provide your comments at the end of the presentation. And with that, I will introduce our consultant project manager, Jennifer Musselman with Kittleson, and she will go ahead and present the presentation.
Thank you, Jensen, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and Ford Pinellas Board. My name is Jennifer Musselman. I work for Kittleson. I'm a consultant to the Florida Department of Transportation, here to talk to you today about a potential lane repurposing on 5th Avenue North in St. Petersburg. So our project is on 5th Avenue North between Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Street and 16th Street. So it's about a 7-block stretch, and if you're familiar with the area, it runs right in front of St. Anthony's Hospital. So St. Anthony's is the major land use fronting on the north side, and then it runs parallel to the I-375 ramp spur, as Jensen was alluding to. This project was brought about 2 years ago. One of the district's priorities is, of course, safety, and a big part of safety is managing speeds on our roadways. So we did a district-wide look at locations that had a high posted speed, high speed limit, based on the areas that they're serving. And so Fifth Avenue was flagged as one of those locations that has a high posted speed, 35 miles per hour, based on what its function is. So it's serving a lot of residential communities, it's serving access in and out of the hospital, and it's very close to downtown. So you have a lot of these downtown activities, a lot more multimodal activity happening on the street here. It also came up as a location with a high off-peak crash severity. So again, as we're focusing on speeds and speed management during rush hour, traffic and congestion can naturally slow folks down. Speed is not always as much of an issue during those peak times. But at 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock at night, when folks can travel as fast as they please, the severity of crashes can increase, leading to more serious injuries and fatalities. So you can see in the circle here, Fifth Avenue North popped up with that red. So it was one of the highest off-peak crash severities within the whole district. And there was 2 fatalities in the 5-year period that we looked at in this area. The last piece of this study, and what led, again, to Fifth Avenue being prioritized, was the number of households without access to a vehicle. So you've heard this a couple presentations today, but folks who don't have a vehicle or only have one vehicle in their household have to rely on walking, biking, taking the bus, carpooling to get around. They can't necessarily drive to their everyday needs, and so these multimodal non-auto modes become really important to make sure that these folks can get to their jobs, the store, to groceries, healthcare, just to meet their daily needs. So in addition to that speed management study that was led by FDOT, this project is also supporting the St. Petersburg Complete Streets Implementation Plan. So that implementation plan set a 30 mile per hour desired speed. So a lot of good consistency here with wanting to lower the speeds on Fifth Avenue. The Complete Streets Plan also identified a potential future trail. So there is an abandoned rail line here. So the city identified that as a possible opportunity for a trail, and you can see that would tie in just on the west side of our project. And getting to a point that Dave made in his presentation just earlier, an opportunity arose to make an impact here, to make a change that we can take advantage of. So FDOT has a programmed resurfacing project, a programmed maintenance project in fiscal year 2024. So those are 2023, 2024 calendar years. That full project goes all the way from Tyrone Boulevard over to 4th Street, but within that there is an opportunity to potentially implement this lane repurposing in a more cost-effective way, take advantage of the work that they're already doing, close the road once, and get some efficiencies out of that and still make a meaningful change. So this is what Fifth Avenue looks like today. There are 2 travel lanes as you head west and 1 travel lane heading east. There's currently 1 bike lane headed west, and that's on street, and then 1 sidewalk on the north side. And if you recall back to that map, the interstate is on the south side, so there's not a lot of need for sidewalks on that south side of the road. Our proposal is to repurpose one of those westbound travel lanes to create a 2-way bicycle facility. So to provide bikes the opportunity to travel in both directions, just as cars are able to travel in both directions, and then provide some separation. So in that buffer space, that 4-foot buffer, there would be some sort of physical barrier so that bikes feel comfortable traveling close to moving vehicles. We're still working through what exactly that barrier could look like. You can see in the bottom right a facility that's already open in St. Petersburg on 1st Avenue South that has a concrete barrier. Right now we're thinking about something more like the top left with that temporary curb treatment. There's a few reasons for that. One is cost, as we're trying to implement this in a resurfacing project in an efficient manner. The other is, as I'm sure the board is aware of, the ongoing downtown mobility study in St. Petersburg. There is a chance that 375 could get looked at and possibly removed in the future. If that happens, we'd probably have to reimagine Fifth Avenue once again. And so we want to make sure any changes that we're making to the street can be easily reviewed and changed again in the future without a lot of money and materials wasted. So the benefits that we see, first and foremost, is really getting the speeds down. So I'm sure you all have seen charts like the one on the right before. As speeds increase, the chances of a pedestrian surviving a crash significantly decrease. So on streets where we have a lot of expected activity, we really want to be as close to that 20 and 30 mile per hour operating speed as possible to increase the chances of survival of these crashes. There's also safety benefits in narrowing the roadway and crossings. It's fewer lanes for both pedestrians and bicyclists to have to cross at a time. And with the reallocation of the space, we're able to provide better bicycle mobility and connect into some key facilities that the city already has. So this is what it would look like from above. So you can see the green paint that we would suggest at driveways and key conflict points to really bring attention to the facility. And we do have those bikes traveling in both directions with the separation between the bikes and the travel lane. And then right now we're proposing to raise the bicycle facility at bus stops. There are a few PSTA bus stops along the route. This way, if folks have any kind of mobility device, wheelchair, they're able to have a continuous path from the sidewalk onto the bus without having to go up and down multiple times. So the lane repurposing itself, we're focused on MLK to 16th. And then as part of this project, we're also proposing widening the sidewalk on the north side of the road from 16th through the interstate. The interstate right now is a barrier to bike mobility. There's not a good way to get through it for several blocks north and south. And so we're able to provide that facility so bikes can continue on and then get back into the neighborhood and take advantage of the great grid network that St. Pete has and travel through the neighborhood greenways for the rest of their route. So this is what that transition would look like at 16th Street. So you have the two-way on-street facility on the right, the green paint directing them up to the sidewalk or the wide walk, and then you have that wide sidewalk that they could continue the rest of their journey through the interstate to the west. I do want to talk about traffic, as is always a concern whenever we're taking away a lane. I'm sure you all have seen level of service before, heard a lot about it. Just wanted to give a quick reminder that we don't think of it as we do letter grades in school, where we always wanted to get the A, of course. We always wanted to get the best grade. When it comes to traffic, especially in urban and downtown environments, level of service A, as you can see, is not the best use of our space. Our space is so limited and so valuable in these places, we want to make the absolute best use as possible. So in these downtown environments, we really want to be more in that D to E range, where traffic is still moving, folks aren't stuck in gridlock, but we're making good use of the roadway space during all hours of the day, not just those hard 15 minutes in the evening, but optimizing the space for all 24 hours of the day. So you want to balance the level of service with the other benefits that we are potentially seeing from this project to our non-motorized users. So if you look at those letter grades today, you see a lot of B's and C's and D's, so all looking at a good, acceptable level of service. If you grow traffic for 25 years and don't make any changes to the street, still mostly C's and D's, you do see that interstate ramp switching to a level of service E. So not a huge concern, but that is a change, and this is not anything that our project is affected. This will naturally happen as traffic grows in the area. Then when you add our project, the main change there is at 16th Street. So we go from level of service D to level of service E. And what this equates to is an average 22 extra seconds during the rush hour commute. So if you're looking at the clock on your car, you'll still arrive home at the same minute, but you'll arrive home about 20 seconds later than you would without the lane repurposing project. The rest of the corridor is still expected to operate at B and C, so still in that good acceptable range. And those traffic delays are really only expected in that peak of the peak, the very rush. So this is a profile of traffic throughout the day on Fifth Avenue. You can see in the midnight hours, very low. Then we peak in the morning, a little bit of a lunch peak again in the middle of the day. And then the worst of the traffic is 4:15 to 5:15 with that real sharp peak in the 15 minutes at 5 p.m. So that 22 seconds will really be focused in that blue window for a relatively short part of the day with minimal impact in the remaining hours of the day. We had a public meeting in July to get input. So some of the thoughts we heard there about Fifth Avenue North today, folks said that cars move too fast. They do appreciate the proximity to the highway and the ease of being able to get across town. There's not too much traffic right now, which contributes to that ease of getting across town. Noted some need for sidewalk improvements and that they don't feel safe biking today on the street. With the proposed sections, they noted that they would feel more comfortable walking and biking. They had some questions about the hospital and how the hospital and ambulances would be impacted by the change. They really appreciated having that raised buffer between the bicycle facility and the street, and liked that it would be raised at transit stops to make it easier. So just getting to that question about hospital input, we did meet with both St. Anthony's Hospital management and Sunstar paramedics. Neither expressed any concerns about the project. The hospital is actually aiming to move its main entrance up to 7th, so this kind of helps reinforce that for them and shifting most of the travel patterns up into the neighborhood. And the ambulance noted that on their way to the hospital, they're really looking for a smooth, steady ride, not necessarily for the fastest route to get to the hospital, as they already have the patient under care. So those few blocks that they would have to travel through this at a little bit of a slower pace, they were not concerned about, as long as they had that good, smooth path into the hospital. So last slide, and I'm happy to take any questions and would love to hear y'all's input. I did note that this project the main maintenance project goes all the way up to Tyrone Boulevard, so there's a few other things we're trying to integrate into this, mainly 4 new pedestrian crossings that occur at the proposed neighborhood greenways in that St. Pete Complete Streets Plan. Trying to fill some sidewalk gaps that exist along the street, and then just some general intersection safety improvements that we noted out in the field. So this process that will have to go through the district, central office, and ultimately FHWA for the lane repurposing is really focused on just those few blocks between ML King Street and 16th Street, but there are some additional things that we're trying to do more comprehensively along 5th Avenue North. So with that, happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions or comments? Well, as a St. Pete City Council member, I love this project, and I travel through here regularly, and I know that a lot of people are very interested in this. I'm not sure if I heard you mention, but St. Anthony's Hospital is in favor of the direction of this discussion and are supportive of it, because they're probably one of the most important stakeholders in this project, but from the ingress and egress of the EMS services and employees, and they like this.
Correct.
Great. One little comment is if you guys could just keep an eye on that intersection of MLK and 5th Avenue North, especially if you're heading east on 5th Avenue North to take a left and head north on MLK. That is a very confusing intersection because you've got two-way streets that meet one-way streets, and we've had a lot of accidents there from people just not paying attention to the traffic changes. If you could take a look at that while you're doing this.
Absolutely, and that's one of the intersection safety improvements that we're looking at. There are definitely some things we can change just with the way the signal is configured and some of the signs out there to make it more clear to drivers that they do have to turn. They're not able to go straight.
Yeah, because it's dangerous when you have a situation where it's head-on and T-bone collisions are pretty dangerous. So thank you. Sounds like you're on it. Any other questions, comments?
Just a real quick question for Whit. What are we, we're not voting today, but what would we be voting for or on? What's our role in this?
So the department asked me for a letter of support for this project. And I think Jensen mentioned that this has to be approved by not only people in the district, but in Tallahassee and by the Federal Highway Administration. So they like to put together a full package.
For a city road?
It's a state road.
Oh, this is a state road. That's what, okay,
Yeah,
that answers
It's
my
part of the state highway, and it has access directly to the interstate.
Fifth Avenue is a state.
It's part of Alt 19.
Go figure. Thank you. That's really what I was wondering, why what role we had in it. So that clarifies things.
Yeah, and you know, for other lane conversions or repurposing, you know, we've kind of brought the project forward for the community, and we've had that evaluated, and then we brought it back to the board or the state to take it on. This is one that they've brought to us, and so I think they just want to make sure that there's local community support. So it's a little different animal in that regard.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you all.
And this next item, I'll turn this over to Whit. It's a discussion on the establishment of our nominating committee.
Well, every year about this time, we have a transition in board leadership on the executive committee. And so what you have in your materials is information about the eligible board members to serve as officers in 2022. We do have one-year terms for all of our executive committee members. There has been historically a little bit of a tradition that the chair continues for 2 years, but it's a one-year term, and there's been an acknowledgement of a reappointment. That's not possible this year, and so with your departure, we need to fill the chair position. And so the question today is whether the board would like to form a nominating committee to address that slate of candidates and bring that to the board at the November meeting, or whether the board members would be comfortable voting on the officers at the November board meeting without the benefit of a nominating committee. And if we want to establish the nominating committee, we'll need a recommendation or a desire to serve on the nominating committee shown.
Commissioner Long.
Whit, could you just state the folks that are eligible for the
Sure.
positions?
So we have Mayor Kennedy is the current vice chair. Councilmember Albritton is the current treasurer. You are the current secretary, Madam Chairman, Madam Commissioner. And then we have eligible members are listed. Everybody except Councilmember Rice is eligible. There are some upcoming elections in March, so you know, we would need to navigate through that. And I understand Councilmember Albritton and Mayor Kennedy have elections coming up in March. So that, you know, if something were to happen and they weren't reelected to their positions, then the board would have to make a second determination about who to fill those spots.
Well, I would like to recommend, if it's appropriate, that we elevate Mayor Kennedy to the chairmanship, since Commissioner Rice is leaving us, reluctantly, I'm sure, and that we keep the other folks, and then after the March election, maybe we need to add someone?
Well, we would need to add somebody at the November meeting to fill whatever other position. So if she vacates vice chair, what would we do with the other positions? Would we move somebody else into the vice chair position? Or would we, you know, so we want 4 executive committee members. And we are planning an executive committee meeting on December 8th.
Got it.
Commissioner Seal.
Well, as you know, traditionally, it has rotated between the city and then the county. So I guess my suggestion would be, as Mayor Kennedy ascends into the chairmanship, then it would be logical to have Commissioner Long be the vice chair. And then Councilmember Albritton continue as treasurer
Currently, and then we would need to appoint a new secretary.
A new secretary.
Mm-hmm. And again, we can do that next month, or we could do it this month. It really, I mean, it's your choice.
Okay.
The only question really is whether you want to form a nominating committee. We have to ask that per our bylaws. Doesn't sound like there's a lot of desire for a nominating committee. Mayor Bajowski. too.
It would be good to get at some of the issues that perhaps a nominating committee should discuss, which would be the pros and cons of going back to alternating between city and county. I would also say having a strong grasp on, the executive committee is asked to attend and be part of a lot of other regional meetings that can be very time consuming, and just making sure we understand that, we need to have that covered as well, and what that looks like.
I will say that it's helpful to have the chair serve as part of those regional meetings. I think that adds a lot of weight. But we will also be next month appointing positions to all those different committees. And it doesn't have to be the chair or executive committee members, although that's generally desirable. So we have the TMA leadership group, we have the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance, and that really should be kind of one and the same. And then we have, what am I missing?
CCC.
Well, that's the transportation.
MPOAC.
MPOAC, that's right, the MPO Advisory Council. So we have 3 next month that we'll be appointing.
Okay. Mayor Bajowski.
Should appoint a nominating committee to work through all these different things so that we're not trying to figure it out here. And then just ensure that you go out to the broader board to find out who's interested for whatever open position there's going to be. I mean, traditionally, we've moved people up.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
And I think I heard a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to establish a nominating committee. Oh, Commissioner Gerard.
If you're going to appoint people to committees or head representatives to other committees, should the nominating committee do that as well, or make suggestions in that regard?
That's an interesting idea. I don't see any problem with
Kinda makes
having the
sense.
nominating committee talk about that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
So
none
now I'll
opposed?
need some volunteers to serve on the nominating committee.
I believe I can volunteer.
Yes, you can.
Okay, I volunteer.
And I'd like to make it an odd number. One year we had an even number, and it was a challenge.
Was that okay, Councilmember Albritton is,
Do you want to
Yeah, I was
serve on the
gonna
nominating
ask.
committee?
is that a conflict of interest?
If you, okay.
Okay, Commissioner Gerard, Commissioner Noble, do we have anybody else?
I think 3 is plenty if you want to go with 3.
Okay, then we have 3. And then we'll talk about setting up a date and a meeting and
Yeah,
keeping the board engaged. Okay.
Vote to approve those members of the nominating committee, please, since we did it in 2 separate actions. I'm sorry.
Sure.
moved.
Sure. So do we hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay. To appoint Commissioner Gerard, Commissioner Nobles, and myself to the nominating committee. And we have a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. We have our nominating committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Gerard. Thank you, Commissioner Nobles. What is next? So next, I'm going to hand this over to Whit for our director's report.
Okay, thank you. I'll get through this fairly quickly. I want to cover on the spotlight update that the Waterborne Transportation Committee is continuing to meet, and a lot has happened over the last month or 2. We've had an agreement at the county level for the Cross Bay Ferry that was a very interesting discussion. And we had our Waterborne Committee meet in late August. And the committee is starting to put together a system plan of sorts, sort of a countywide policy on waterborne transportation with a phased implementation strategy that is contingent upon finding a local source of funding so that we can ensure operations of service like transit service and not entertainment service. And that just requires a level of frequency and reliability and commitment that you can only really get from having a steady, stable local funding source. That committee is working through the scenarios for that and will be presented at their next meeting in December. I believe December 17th is the meeting. A system plan and set of recommendations that would ultimately be part of amendment to our 2045 Advantage Pinellas Long-Range Transportation Plan. That's really important in the bureaucratic world because our LRTP is fairly silent. It only has passing reference to waterborne transportation in a few sections, so it's there, but it's not there in a real meaningful, implementable way. And so we want to beef that up considerably. So that's what the committee will be bringing back to the full board for recommendation. We are putting the agenda together for the December Waterborne Committee, and we're looking at having the Cross Bay Ferry come and make a presentation to the committee so that we can understand their plans more fully and how they integrate with the county plans, the county-specific plans, I should say. And it was interesting. I'll mention that Mayor Bajowski and I were on a phone call with the Division of State Parks regarding Honeymoon Island, and their unit management plan for Honeymoon and Caladesi Island State Parks is receptive or planning for a water taxi type service from the mainland to the park entrance where the Caladesi ferry operates, or near the park entrance.
Or a tram.
Or a tram of some sorts, but they recognize...
It's in their 10-year plan.
They recognize that the tram would get stuck in traffic and maybe the water taxi would provide a different user experience. But yeah, both options are there. And that's good news because once it's in their unit management plan, then maybe state dollars can flow from their sources to help this. But that's something our group hadn't really considered, so that was really important to add. And then for the Cross Bay Ferry, we are having conversations with county administration on some tangible metrics and milestones that are achievable that demonstrate that we're moving toward year-round regular service and not just seasonal service, and that Pinellas County is not an afterthought, but a part of the plans for the region. And that's we're going to have to see how that goes. And then wrapped up into all this fun stuff is the federal grant that had a notice of funding availability that was issued. And I apologize if there was any miscommunication on our part. We were heading toward working with PSTA to submit an application on behalf of the Clearwater Ferry through PSTA, and then decided because of the interlocal agreement reached between the counties and the cities for the Cross Bay Ferry that maybe this year would be their time to provide that application, and next year, FY23, when we were looking for local commitments to the Clearwater Ferry and our own waterborne service, that would be the year for that. So that is currently the plan. I believe Hillsborough County did submit that application for docking and vessel improvements, and I think having a regional ask is probably better than having two applications submitted, but we hope next year that we'll have our system-wide plan, we'll have amended our long-range plan, and we'll be able to speak very clearly about the important transportation connections that it makes for a lot of Pinellas County residents. So I'll stop there and see if anybody wants to add anything about the Waterborne Committee, but I thought it was important to bring the full board a little bit more up to speed about where we are. And we do intend to bring the committee's work back to this board probably in February for some kind of action so that we can start the budget process with our local governments and the county at the right time. But we intend to keep the Waterborne Transportation Committee operating and functioning as long as this board wants to do so, and not sunset it as maybe originally planned at the end of the year.
Good.
Any questions for me, or are you good? All right, I'll keep going. The next item is the Dunedin Causeway Honeymoon Island State Park commitments and opportunities, and I mentioned the one. We had a really good meeting, I thought, with the Division of State Parks about their unit management plan, but we have a commitment from Honeymoon Island State Park to expand the entrance at the park and Personally, I found some really good news in that. There is going to be a dedicated entrance for bicycle and pedestrian traffic at the park, which you can't do now, and is frustrating. And when we complete our loop and the coast-to-coast trail, you got a trail going right out to Honeymoon Island State Park, and I think that'll be a tremendous advantage to have that. But there will be more vehicle capacity. We are accelerating the improvements for the Curlew Road and Alt 19 project, which would include a widening of Alt 19 through that intersection a little bit to the north and a little bit to the south to 4 lanes to accommodate the future traffic growth. And also there are going to be some safety improvements at the intersection for pedestrians and bicyclists, which, you know, we probably have the greatest concentration at that intersection of bikes and pedestrians outside of downtown Dunedin and outside of downtown St. Petersburg. So it's a pretty big intersection in that part of the county. And then finally, I want to mention that we have an advanced traffic management system that's funded and undergoing design for implementation along the Causeway that would provide variable message signs, cameras, and information whenever the parking lot closes to let motorists know before they even get on the Causeway that the park is closed for a period of time and they should do something else for a few hours. And in the meantime, before that's done, we're working with Pinellas County to get some signs out there temporarily that could be operated by the park using Bluetooth technology or something similar, so that the park can then operate it once the entrance to the park is expanded, and they might be dealing with some closures in the spring. So there's a lot going on, and I want to credit Mayor Bajowski for being just an absolute bulldog about this, and that's a compliment. And I want to thank FDOT and Tom Washburn and the county staff for participating and being good partners in trying to find good solutions out there. Any questions about that?
We have to compliment Whit too, because he never says no. You know, I won't help you. So I appreciate that.
Please don't let Tina hear that.
Yeah.
It's called job security.
Because, you know, when somebody's being a pain, you really do want to say no, and he never does. And I really respect him for that.
All right.
He's never told me you were a pain. He's thinking it, I know.
I said bulldog in the nicest way possible. The Gateway Partnership met on October 1st, and I'm really proud about this group and want to give Christina Mendoza of our staff a lot of credit. The Gateway Partnership is the local governments of the Gateway area, the 3 cities in the county that are working together. And, you know, we had a fantastic report, roundtable of all the things that they're individually doing in the Gateway to further the master plan recommendations. And I thought that was a really robust discussion. There's a lot of good things happening in the Gateway. Some are smaller scale, some are bigger scale, but it's definitely happening. And the good news is the Florida Department of Transportation is looking at freeing up some money from their commute alternatives program that we might be able to use to develop a transportation management organization out there to help manage first mile, last mile, and employee commute options in and out for the major employers. We don't have a defined project or scope, but they're not really interested in funding staff positions, so we're not looking to create like a new organization. We want to have actionable projects and then engage the business community in helping us. Some of you may be aware of the West Shore Alliance and some of the things that they're doing over there in the West Shore area. For the Gateway to stand up and be as strong economically as the West Shore area is, you're going to need to have a little more structure and a little more cohesion, and so this may be a way to do that. I'm mindful of not creating another bureaucracy, so we want to work with the chambers or other organizations that might be in existence. But I thought that was an interesting development, and we're going to see where that goes in the next year. The last item I want to mention is our Investment Corridor Strategic Planning Initiative. So you approve the scope of services today for the TEALS, Target Employment and Industrial Lands Update. This is a complementary planning project that ties directly into what Dave Sobush of the Tampa Bay Partnership was mentioning. Our Advantage Pinellas plan envisions 9 investment corridors in Pinellas County that link housing and jobs with transit access. And it partners well with the countywide housing strategy that is underdeveloped in partnership with Pinellas County and the other housing entitlement communities. So we are in the process of going through some metrics to see where our investment for the pilot project would have the best bang for the buck. What are the redevelopment potential? What are the land use characteristics? And where can we implement something like express bus service? I mean, we're not talking about taking away a lane or putting rail in or anything like that. We're just talking about having more frequent, higher speed transit service so that it doesn't take 90 minutes to get from point A to point B. And the corridors we're looking at right now are Alt 19 from downtown Clearwater to Park Street and really down to Central Avenue and the Sunrunner through that Alt 19 corridor. And then East Bay, Roosevelt, from Clearwater Largo Road or maybe Indian Rocks Road all the way out to Carillon. And then we're looking at 34th Street from the Skyway Marina District up to the Carillon Gateway area. And I met with the Largo City Commission last night. They have 2 of these corridors running through them. They didn't tell me a preference, but they were very excited to hear this, and they seem like they'll be eager partners on that. And then we just want to make sure we have the support of the local governments if we implement, in one of these corridors, a study like this. We've budgeted $600,000, so it's a pretty robust amount of money, and I see it as much a redevelopment strategy as anything else. Mayor?
I think I missed part of what you said. You said there were 3 quarters you're trying to just simply improve. You're not looking to add lanes, you just want to improve the actual headways of the bus?
We won't.
Like, instead of 30 minutes or an hour, make it 15 minutes? That's what you're referring to?
Yeah, limited stop express bus service would be the first lowest cost option for doing that. We would look at other options too. The idea would be that you could make the travel time in a third or 2/3 of the time of a regular bus.
So limited stop is, okay.
More like an express rather than a stop every quarter mile.
Okay.
That's one scenario, and so that's what this study will look at. But it's really more of a redevelopment and regulatory reform strategy because we see housing being a key redevelopment activity within these corridors because they're very commercial-heavy corridors, and they have a lot of excess parking in some cases, particularly Alt 19. And maybe there's a transition opportunity. These are already built-up commercial lands, and I just think you'd have less opposition from established residential areas to having different housing types in these corridors.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Are you ready for me to move on to the Legislative Committee?
I am.
Okay. The Legislative Committee met earlier, and this is an action item for you. The committee reviewed federal transportation legislation, some pending state legislation, the letter that I drafted and we submitted to our legislative delegation on the crosswalks and rectangular rapid flashing beacons. I've already heard back from 2 of our legislators yesterday saying they absolutely oppose any attempts to undermine those safety measures. So the letter is attached in your packet. And then Linda Fisher of our staff has worked with me to develop a set of draft legislative policies, and the committee recommended the board approve these legislative policies. They are around the areas of more flexible transportation funding for urban areas like ours. And frankly, if it's statewide, I don't care, but we need more flexibility here in Pinellas County. A targeted and collaborative approach to safety, so working with our partners on Safe Streets Pinellas. Basically stopping the preemption laws and allowing for local planning authority and regulation, and then ensuring a resilient future for Florida. Those are the main topic areas, and there's a more substantive document in your packet. So that's the committee's recommendation, and I don't know, Mayor or Council Member, you're the chair of the committee. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you summed it up, so I would move approval.
I had a question.
Okay. Mayor Bajowski.
So in your dialogue, and I'm sure you have discussed this, but I was just thinking, given our discussion earlier today and how we need not only flexible funding sources, but consistent future funding sources to plan and build towards. Is the future funding source, consistent funding source, a part of this flexible? Or, because it's not very clear, and what I was thinking after we had our conversation earlier was how everybody was saying, it would be great if we could have the two counties even come together, right? On that one, but it's like, but we need our state people to come together and not fight us every step of the way. We have to convince them to be a partner in this as well. So I don't know, if you could just enlighten me on your dialogue there.
Yeah, and a lot of that also was conversation that we had at our workshop back in August with our legislators. So I think that they've gotten the message pretty loud and clear, but certainly flexibility is very important, but also consistency. And so I don't know if it's not laid out clear enough that that's our intention, but I mean, certainly I think that was collected in our conversations, so.
And that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ensure, when you read something in writing, it doesn't always say everything, but I know what your all motivations are, so
Right.
thank you.
The words are in there, particularly with the replacement or enhancement of the gas tax as a revenue source, because it is really not doing what it was supposed to do, originally intended to do, and that's only going to get worse with electric vehicles. So this references looking at vehicle miles traveled and other forms of revenue, which could be at the local or the state level or the federal level.
And there's also a piece in there about protecting the transportation trust funds as well. It's another piece of it.
So we have a
Mayor
motion.
Kennedy?
Yeah, I was, Mayor Bajowski, I was just going to say, I went with the group to talk to Senator Hooper. And I was just thinking after that conversation, because we had this awesome conversation and we're going to be meeting with another one of our delegation, but even if one is not on the legislative committee, I think that if you have a relationship and you're on this board, the more voices that they hear from us is a good thing. So I'm asking you to reach out to them exactly what you just told us, and not just on the issues that you were talking about right now, but also before when you were talking about the transportation. I mean, I wanted to yell out truth, truth, so if anyone, if you feel like, or you don't know your legislative delegation well, maybe make an appointment and introducing yourself to some of the newer members. But I was just going to mention that to you because I know you know several of them.
Thank you, Cookie.
Councilmember Gabbard.
I also just wanted to mention to everyone who wasn't at the committee meeting that we are looking at planning a day where we'll go visit Tallahassee during sessions. So anybody that wants to participate, whether you're on the committee or not, would certainly be welcome. So we'll let you know what that is when we figure it out. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Could we restate the motion, please?
To approve the 2022 legislative priority list.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That passes unanimously. Thank you.
The last item I'll mention, we did have a TMA leadership group, well, two items, that Commissioner Long mentioned back on September 17th. It was a very good dialogue, and we were working toward a December workshop to start that conversation. We are going to invite all the elected officials who want to come. So it's not just TMA appointees or Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance appointees. It would be any elected official who's interested in a regional conversation about moving forward with some type of initiative to acquire or use the rail lines that serve this area. And that's an initiative that Hillsborough County Kimberly Overman, Commissioner, is leading on their side, and she's chair of the TMA leadership group. The Department of Transportation has agreed to help facilitate that meeting. The Tbarda group is going to be participating in that meeting, as are the transit agencies. And there is an interest and a desire by HART and by Hillsborough MPO and maybe by others in our county to look at potentially acquiring or using the CSX tracks. But there are other rail lines in and around the area that could be considered, so it's not necessarily limited to that. We see this as the first start of a conversation that would maybe be the foundation of updating our next long-range transportation plan for 2050, which we're about to get started on next year, and ensuring that there's a policy framework and that we are working together regionally to define not only a single starting project, but a system plan that makes sense so that we can see ourselves, whether you're in Brooksville or Clearwater or St. Pete or Lakeland, in that system plan for how eventually we would have a connected transit network like Dave Sobush talked about. I mean, he mentioned 4 rail lines in that. So I think it's an overdue conversation. I remember Commissioner Seal was there in 2015 when I first started here, when CSX came to us and said, we want to sell these rail lines. Well, nothing's really happened, and there's no negotiating with CSX until you have a very defined project and a source of funding and a commitment. And we don't have any of those things. So we got to start the conversation somewhere. So that's going to be replacing the regular TMA leadership group meeting with this workshop in December. What is the date, Chelsea? December 10th? December 10th. And we'll get the information out to everybody. FDOT headquarters. We got to think regionally. It'd be in the morning at 9:30. I don't think the AM peak is as bad as it used to be. Anyway, I wanted to mention that. And then finally, we did have some correspondence from our Citizens Advisory Committee appreciating the law enforcement members that came and spoke to the CAC about safety, DUI, and law enforcement for Vision Zero. I listened to those meetings, and I got to tell you, the law enforcement representatives hit it out of the park. They were phenomenal. They did a great job. They were very empathetic. They were very responsive. The CAC just really wanted to congratulate them, and they would like to have the full board get that similar presentation. So we'll see, if we can fit that in at some point. But the law enforcement, they hate being the bad guy, but they have a really important role to play. And certainly, wrong way drivers on our interstate have been a historic problem, and a lot of that is DUI related. So that was part of the impetus for that. Anyway, it was a good discussion, and the letter's in your packet for information.
Okay.
That's all I have.
All righty. Any other questions or comments?
I do want to mention the Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit, November 2nd through the 4th. Coming up. That is a free event. I would encourage you to just drop in for a virtual session or two. There is a hybrid format so that the second day is going to be in-person walking and riding tours if you're inclined. But the day 1 and day 2 are going to be virtual. And I'm happy to announce that we got the U.S. DOT Deputy Assistant Secretary for Safety Policy to be our keynote speaker. Thank you, Mayor Kennedy, for your help. Thank you, Commissioner Long, for your help, because Doyle introduced me to the guy who helped get it done, and I think Harry Glenn may have helped too. So we have a big guy coming, and it would be great to have an audience. And I don't know what our attendance is, but I think we have a really good attendance of over 150 or so, somewhere north of 150. So if you all can attend, again, it would be great to see many of your faces there. Not in person, virtual.
Also, there's a special prize, right? How does the special prize work?
I have no idea. So if somebody can come up and talk about the special prize, I am ignorant on that topic.
You earn points by participating in events. That's how it works.
Yeah, so for the Gulf Coast Safe Street Summit, you can register. It is a completely free event. We want anybody and everybody to join us, from public to community leaders to politicians, just everybody getting involved throughout the region. And you can register at gulfcoastsafestreetsummit.org/register. For the two-night beach stay, we do have some great prizes. Throughout the event, you'll be able to get points for attending sessions, going to networking events, visiting our exhibitors virtually. And the winners will get some $100 gift cards, $50 gift cards, and then a two-night beach stay at the Gulf Breeze Inn. Is that correct? Yes, fantastic.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Kennedy, for helping us get that secured. So we're really excited about that. It's going to be a really fun event. We've got, like Whit said, some excellent speakers, and we hope to see you there.
None of those prizes are spent with our PL dollars. Sponsorships. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Whit. And I think with that, we can adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everyone. Safe drive home.
Thank you.
Thank you.